I am live. It is Sunday, the 8th of October 2023, and I'm reading out of Eyes of Horus. It's a Joan Marshall Grants memory book. It is her life as Ra-up, who is an heir to the nomarch of the ORYX. There is war brewing with the rest of Egypt, and we are now in part 6 of this book, and the second chapter is entitled The ORYX Marches. The ORYX. After consulting with the other captains, I decided that our armies should enter the reed in 3 columns, not only to protect us from surprise, but so that the spies, which Menhad was sure to have posted on all the roads leading north, might find it more difficult to estimate our full strength. There were 3 available roads. The central one, a royal road, was broad and in most places paved with stone. The western road was a little more than a wide track, linking the villages on the edge of the desert. The third followed the western bank of the river and passed through the old capital. The 3 roads were seldom separated from each other by more than a few thousand paces, and if any of the columns were warned by one of the watchers in the villages near which they would pass, that Menhad's army was disposed in force ahead of us, there would be time for us to close our ranks before the battle was joined. I decided to take the central road so as to keep more easily in touch with both the other armies. The hare took the western road and the jackal that on our right. If it were true that Menhad was waiting for news of the north before taking any action, it was unlikely that we should find serious opposition during the first day's march. But a precaution was adopted, the formation considered the safest while passing through hostile territory. Where the width of the road permitted, the soldiers went 6 abreast, each 100 under its leader, who at the first sign of danger would deploy into a depth of 3 ranks. In front would be the javelin throwers, who after their attack would crouch down to allow free aim to the bowmen. And behind these again stood the mace bearers, who would pass through the other ranks to enter the fight at close quarters as soon as the javelin throwers and bowmen had played their part. I told Kias that her women must henceforth move in double file, with a file of mace bearers on each side of them, whose first duty would be the protection of the women, and instead of their coming at the end of the column, the women were to move up to allow of a rear guard of 200. Once we had crossed the boundary of the jackal, it was easy to see which villages had suffered under the old rule, and which had been protected by a kindly headsman. Those who had been oppressed hurried out of their houses, or came running across the fields from the scattered farms to shout greetings to us, to bring gifts of bread and fruit to the marching men, while the others were suspicious of any change in their accustomed system of rulership. It was evident that news of our coming had preceded us, for people had gathered at the wells, which, as on most of the royal roads, were spaced at intervals of about 6,000 paces. At a few points there were demonstrations of open hostility, but the only weapon they used were stones or clods of earth, which were easily deflected on our shields. No one was hurt, except a mace bearer who was cut above the eye by a stone flung by a small boy, who, seeing what he had done, scuttled to his mother for protection. The mother, when she saw the mace bearer, had no intention of pursuing the child, but instead shouted to him, "You throw so straight, it's a pity you ain't old enough to join our army." Ceased to stare sullenly at us, and began to smile and wave, at the same time administering a sharp slap to her belligerent offspring. Towards evening we came in sight of the old capital, and here the jackal joined us, to avoid passing through a thickly populated part of the nome. Hanuk said he had told his men to scatter among several nearby farms, all of which we knew to be owned by people friendly to us, and to wait there until he sent them further instructions. They would provide a rear guard in case any attack developed from the south, and as soon as we had found a suitable place to spend the night, a messenger would be sent to tell them our location. Soon afterward, a runner from the Hare arrived to tell us they were encamped as planned in the gardens of an overseer who had long been a watcher. As we drew nearer to the Great Pyramids, we saw a herd of 5 bulls being driven along the road ahead of us. They were in charge of a temple servant who, by the colour of his tunic, we knew to belong to the temple of Sekhmet, which had recently been built outside the old capital. 2 priests belonging to the same temple were following the herd, and when I drew level with them, they prevented to be engaged in earnest conversation and not to have noticed the approach of the column. I asked the elder of them in whose name the bulls were to sacrifice, and he answered, Sekhmet, in a harsh and arrogant voice. Priests, even false priests, enjoy immunity from armed interference in their duties, but I considered myself fully justified in replying. As Sekhmet is no longer to be worshipped in Egypt, by the royal decree of Amenhotep, Pharaoh, she can no longer command a sacrifice. Therefore your 5 bulls are to be driven in the wake of my army, for I have no doubt that Ra will be pleased that they should be eaten by the soldiers acting in his name. The priest began to curse me in monotonous tones. Had he been a vehicle of power, his words might have blasted me like a stroke of lightning, but as he was only an ignorant man relying on ritual, he did not understand. We were no more affected than if his voice had been the wiring of a grasshopper. An abandoned country estate, with much of its gardens walls still intact, lay to the east of the road from which it was concealed by a small wood. Had not Sebek known from a previous journey that it was there, I might not have seen what an ideal place it was for us to camp. It was already dusk, and after 2 days of marching, the men were in need of a night rest. I more than expected Kias to tell me that many of her women found the pace too hard and wanted to go home, for I myself was weary after marching almost continuously from dawn to dusk. When I questioned her, Kias told me rather scornfully that her women were less tired than the men. As though to prove the truth of her words, they were already hurrying about, getting food ready and gathering fuel for the cooking fires. As we did not wish to make our presence too conspicuous, only small fires were lit, and around these the men gathered to roast on the points of their daggers collops cut from one of the slaughtered bulls. The men slept in the garden with their women beside them, but Kias, Sebek, Hanuk, and myself unrolled our sleeping mats in the only room of the ruined house, which had a roof still partially intact. I was the last to fall asleep, and for a long time lay watching the moon through a hole in the ragged thatch. A large rat ran across my feet and disappeared through the opening that had long forgotten the door, which had once closed it. There was a slight breeze, and above my head a decaying palm leaf flapped languidly in the draught. Kias was half turned towards me, the moon shining on her face, which looked calm and aloof as the silver mask of a mummy. I woke once during the night, disturbed by another flurry of rats. Kias and Hanuk had moved together in their sleep. His left arm was round her, and she was curled up beside him. I tried to pretend Mary was beside me, but it did little to assuage my loneliness for her. I argued with myself that I should be thankful she was safe in the ORYX. Yet all the time I knew that we should have both been so much happier if we had been together, even though there should be danger as well as rats to disturb our sleep. The previous day I had arranged for 2 of my best scouts to travel in the litters brought with us for the wounded, so that at night they would be fresh to seek such information as I might need. They had gone to the old capital as soon as they had shared the evening meal, and at dawn returned to report to me. The first scout said that all seemed quiet in the town, though he had heard that the high priest of Sekhmet's temple had made a solemn declaration to the people that Menhet was the pharaoh appointed by the gods, and that any who followed the vizier who was attempting to usurp the double crown would be condemned to 1,000 years of torment in the caverns of the underworld. This condemnation he claimed to have been personally authorized by Set. He had then exhorted the assembled people to do everything in their power to hinder the progress of the rebellious South. He also told them that as the army of their Norm had followed Menhet to the royal city, the time for armed resistance by the populace had not yet come, and that they must be patient and wait for the rebel army to be annihilated by the forces under the command of their rightful pharaoh. The high priest then went on to suggest that in spite of the need for patience, there were other means by which they could help their country, such as poisoning the wells at which we were likely to drink, and leaving baskets of fruit by the roadside in which small snakes or scorpions had been thoroughly concealed. He added that this might prove specially valuable, as it would make us suspicious of accepting further offerings, such as had been given by those misguided enough to make us welcome. When the first scout had finished his story, I asked him, did the high priest tell the people that this too was Set's advice? I don't know, he answered, but from whispers I heard, most of them think he had no right to tell them to poison the wells. They reminded each other that if they were caught doing it, they might be condemned according to the law and die the death of the two vipers. I don't think we need worry about the wells, and if we have any doubt, we could always make the well-keeper drink first and see if he was frightened. On how many houses did you see our sign? About when 1 in every 3 had the twisted rope, and on about every 5th door I saw our scales in the form which means he who dwells here has been condemned to judgment of the watchers. Did you hear of any disturbance when Menhet was proclaimed? There was a good deal of muttering, and some said that as he wasn't the royal heir, he must have murdered his brother and so wasn't fit to be pharaoh. There were a few who shouted for vizier, but the overseer's whipmen were swift to quell those protests. He pointed to the scout who had not yet spoken and said, he's got an idea there's trouble hatching, though he's got no real proof. What have you seen? I asked. It doesn't matter about proof. An instinct often gets nearer to the truth than a fact does. It's not exactly what I've seen, nor rightly what I've heard. The army leaving the old capital and going to the royal city. It doesn't seem natural to me. Why not stay and do battle here, instead of letting us pass unhindered, right through this nome and into the next one? An army's first duty is to protect its own nome, pharaoh or no pharaoh. The army of the Reed was famous for its courage and double particular of its honor, since it was slighted by the capital being moved to a rival nome. Yet, at Menhet's orders, they marched out of their quarters, leaving them empty as a barn floor in a famine, marched through the town and took the road to the north, every one of them, meek as a flock of sheep. Only 3 old storekeepers left behind, and 2 of them are blind in one eye. Now there's another thing. You would think this would have made the people resentful and keen to transfer their loyalty to us. But are they? No. I hang around the marketplace, and I've been in 6 taverns. Not to mention conversing with several young women who aren't particular about being free in their talk to strangers. Nearly every one of them wants Menhet to keep the crown, and when I said I thought it was funny, his taking their army away, they shut up quick and wouldn't say any more. You think they have left the barracks only to hide somewhere else in the town? The first man answered this question. No, they marched out all right. One of our people counted them as they were passing. 1,700 of them, more than half of them bowmen, and the rest mace or javelin. Do you think they came back into the town after nightfall? Not into the town, they didn't. I had a friend posted at every entrance pylon, and no one passed through except a few women frightened by rumours of war, who thought they would be safer in the town than in isolated farms until things were peaceful again. The other man said stubbornly, "He's right enough there, but I think they came back after it was dark." Where could they be hidden? He scratched his head reflectively. That's what I've been trying to puzzle out. Trees. Now, you'd want a lot of trees to hide 1,700. And what's round this house is the biggest wood for a long way. They need a building, a nice, large, unsuspicious kind of building. I realized what he was groping towards. The temple of Sekhmet, soldiers hidden in the priest's quarters, waiting to attack our rear as soon as we passed. That's why we've been allowed to come in so far without any attempt being made to stop us. Men had thought we should be defeated before we reached the royal city, and that when the North heard we had been beaten without even being engaged by his main army, they would think the South was finished and transfer their allegiance to him. Are you too tired to go out again immediately? If so, I can send another scout. No, let me go, he said eagerly. Rub ashes into your hair and wear only a loincloth. Pretend you are wandering in your wits. Go to the temple and beg for alms. Try to get into the inner court, and if you can't do that, find out which gate leads into the priest's quarters. If they turn you away, they will help to confirm your suspicions. A crowd of soldiers makes noise, even if they have been ordered to keep quiet. Keep as close as you can to the wall where they have been hidden, and listen. Come back to me as soon as you have anything to report, and be sure no one follows you. You had better have something to eat before you go, and then be as quick as you can. I went to tell the others, but what I thought might be Menhad's strategy, and Hanuk and the rest agreed with me. I will send a messenger back to my men, said Hanuk, to tell them to wait at the village south of the town. The main road doesn't pass through it, and it is one of the few places in this nome where everyone is a watcher. One of the royal granaries adjoins this village, and I know that it is more than half empty. All the jackal can hide there until they are needed, and the village people will supply them with food and water. I will tell them to converge on the granary from several directions. Most of them will manage to avoid being seen, for the water channels in this part of the country are especially deep and afford good cover for anyone crawling along them. A few of them are sure to be seen, said Kias. It doesn't matter if they are, for they would probably be taken for soldiers deserting from Menhad. I don't think anyone would try to stop them, for the field workers are nearly as all in favor of us, and it's only in the big towns that Menhad can hope to find many enthusiastic followers. Although we are fairly well concealed here, said Kias, Menhad must have had spies on the road and know where we are encamped, even if we've been lucky enough to conceal the whereabouts of your men and the hare. As we entered the royal gnomes, he must know we want to join battle with him. He also knows we have been told he has withdrawn to the royal city, and will expect us to follow him there with all speed. It's no use our making a faint march and coming back here after dark like the others did. We must keep them where they are until we have completed a plan for their defeat. But we mustn't let them suspect we have any idea they are still here, or we shall lose all the advantage of a surprise attack, which they at present think is going to be theirs. They know we have come a long way in 2 days, I said, and therefore would not think it suspicious if I decide to rest my men before going on. It's a risk we can't take. For some reason, we don't yet know, they want to give battle somewhere north of where we are now. It must be a good plan, otherwise they would have attacked us last night. Therefore they won't attack us as long as we stay here, unless they suspect we got wind of their plans. We must have time to send scouts ahead to find out if there is another army between us and the royal city, hidden as this one is, so as to make a surprise attack on both the front and rear of our column. We'll have to risk their suspicion. No, we needn't. I suggest that some of my women go to a few of the outlying farms, especially to those we know are disloyal to us, on the pretext of trying to get milk or eggs. They run a risk of being attacked, but I don't think it at all probable. They must pretend to be disgruntled with the hardship of the march and boast that they have managed to make such a nuisance of themselves that you have had to promise them several days' rest. They can also say you are trying to decide whether it would be best to send them home with a small escort to protect them, or whether to insist that they continue to follow the army. The word will soon go round that most of the soldiers of the ORYX are women, and dissatisfied women at that. Why make us a laughing-stock, objected Sebek. Because if the enemy is scornful of us, it will give us an easier victory, and so make it easier to prove that all who go against us are fools. So, that was the second chapter of the part 6 of Eyes of Horus.